Hey everyone, great to be here today. So, as you can see, today we're going to talk about vacuum chambers, enterprise sales, and drug dealing. They asked me to come up with a funny title for the talk, so that's it. So, what do these things have in common? They asked me to speak about a little bit about my career, and I wanted to go over 22 lessons in 22 minutes. From a roughly 10-year career in Silicon Valley, or about 11 now, and a little bit before that. So I'm going to kind of go through a couple different phases of the career, a few different companies I've founded, my experience doing angel investing in Silicon Valley, for those of you who are interested in that, and what I've learned from those experiences. So so I started off as an engineer from a very early age. I was something like 8 years old when I started. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, about my experience founding my first business, Dope Wars, and then experience as a founder employee, so kind of an entrepreneur founding Mafia Wars at Zynga, and then the company that was just spoken about, Gigster, and my new company that I actually announced 2 days ago, Untitled Labs, and the angel investor experience as well. So background as an engineer, kind of a very wide variety of different experiences there, and I went I'd say quite deep in a few areas. Everything from hacking my junior high's computers. This is to circumvent some of the restrictions that they put in front of students, which my classmates loved. To I worked on vacuum chambers in high school. Got to do some robotics for vacuum chambers. A lot of work in computer graphics as well. Built a couple of 3D game engines, ray tracers. I don't know if any of you have heard of Hanson Robotics or seen the robot Sophia, or this one's called Albert Hubo. I actually consulted with these guys when I was in high school as well. That company's been around for a very long time. Just sort of recently broke into media, and a variety of other things. Ported the game Dance Dance Revolution to an FPGA, believe it or not, which was a fun challenge. So a couple lessons from this. One is, if you want to get good at something, you just do enough projects in it. So when I meet aspiring founders, and they ask me, hey, what does it take to be a successful founder? I say, well, you're likely to be a successful founder if you've done 100 projects in some field. So if you've done a lot of engineering projects, or even if you're an athlete or a musician or a scientist or a mathematician, some other field, being a founder is a sequence of doing hundreds of projects. Many of them you don't like to do. Incorporating, hiring lawyers, hiring your first employee, getting an office. All of these projects are tangential from the actual work that you might want to do as a founder. But if you get that experience of doing enough projects, then you kind of have that muscle memory. Stanford has this concept they call being T-shaped. So this is kind of another lesson I learned, was that the more fields of engineering that I engaged in, whether I was doing computer graphics or robotics, each new thing I learned helped me with everything else. So what they mean by being T-shaped is to be broad but be very deep in one specific area. And that helped me a lot to kind of, that breadth helped me learn and be better at my depth, which was in engineering. So I always wanted to found a business, but didn't really find the right time. When Facebook launched the application platform, that was kind of the best chance, because Facebook apps naturally have this ability to go viral. So the business and marketing side is kind of taken care of for you. So this was my first search lab, which is a startup that raises money to search for some concept. So we built 20 Facebook applications. Top one was called Dope Wars, which is basically a virtual drug dealing game. I'm not into drugs personally, but you get, you can kind of role play, and you can kind of, play the game with your friends, and earn money dealing drugs, and buy weapons, things like that. So it ended up being a very popular game. We ended up having about 1 million users and 3 million a year in revenue, which was great for a one-person company. Not a unicorn startup, but we ended up doing quite well. So learned a number of lessons here. One is Peter Thiel talks about the concept of secrets. And the secret I had that I based this business off of was this idea that I knew Facebook would be very big. I knew this in 2007. So I was able to get involved very early and start building apps before other people were. And that was a great time to get involved in the application space. So the other two kind of the next two kind of come together. Having a great co-founder is really transformational. I remember there were times in the business where there were things I really didn't want to do, and my co-founder encouraged me to push through and said, look, you have to, I know the server's going down and this is a hassle you don't want to deal with, but you have to find someone to help you fix the server. You have to hire somebody. You have to do whatever it is. I had a co-founder who helped me through a lot of the toughest parts of the business, and I think without that person and without myself, the business wouldn't have even existed. So that's, I think, the definition of a co-founder. It's a person without whom the company could not exist. So I think having a good co-founder can be truly transformational. And again, as I said earlier, there's a lot of things you'll have to do as a founder that you don't necessarily want to do, but you have to be willing to do those. I mentioned we tried 20 apps. We weren't even sure at one point what success looked like. But when we had our first successful app, it became very obvious. It was an overwhelming influx of demand. And I think that's how I would define success. For those of you who are working in consumer, who are looking for product market fit, and you aren't sure if you have it yet, if you're not sure if you've hit product market fit, you haven't. It's very obvious when you hit that milestone. The other is hire lawyers. So when we were selling Dope Wars to Zynga, we didn't hire a legal team because I wanted to save money on legal fees. And the transaction, I think, would have gone much more smoothly if we actually did have a legal team. If you find me later at drinks, I can explain why. So at Zynga, I ended up founding Mafia Wars, which had 1 to 200 million users, massive user base. The game did about $1 million a day in revenue, sometimes even more. And while I was there, I actually launched 6 other titles. So a title called Fishville, a title called Pirates, and a couple others. It was great because I got experience managing my first large team, and got to kind of do some international work for the company as well. So a number of lessons there. One is that working at a great startup can actually develop your founder's skills to a very large degree. When I sold a company to Zynga, around that time they bought about 3 other very small companies. And those other founders chose to leave Zynga because they thought they could get more done as an entrepreneur. So they left a month or 2 after their exit, and they went and started another company. And I think I was ultimately able to be more successful and able to learn more because I stayed at Zynga for 2 or 3 years. And I had a chance to learn from the founding team at Zynga. So that was incredible, an incredible 3-year experience that I wouldn't give up for anything. I think I learned more in those 3 years than probably any other 3 years of my career. Another thing we did at Zynga was we built monetization and distribution into the product. So those were fundamentally features. We didn't have a separate marketing team and a separate monetization team. There were features in the game that drove usage, that drove monetization. The company had some cultural issues at times, but we were growing so fast that nobody really cared. And that's another thing that I kind of learned is that the more, when you have issues at a company, if you're growing fast, that mitigates literally everything because your employees are going to be happy, your investors are going to be happy, you're going to be able to raise money, you're going to be able to basically do whatever you need to if you're growing quickly. So, I think that's something people forget is they try to solve all these other problems a startup has. Ultimately, growth is the panacea that really solves everything. And after I left Zynga, Zynga was going through an IPO, and everybody wanted to meet me because I've been an early executive there. So I found that if you join a really hot startup, it can propel your career in ways you can't even imagine. At least in Silicon Valley, everyone really cares what brands you're aligned with. Did you work at Google or Facebook? Were you early at Slack or whatever? If you are, it opens way more doors than you can imagine, in addition to how much you get to learn. I have a fair amount of experience angel investing as well, so I started angel investing about 9 years ago, mainly just to be better as a founder, because I thought if I can understand how investors think, then I can naturally, be a better founder. I can understand what type of companies to start. So I kind of developed a playbook for investing, developed a network both of peer investors but also of founders so I could invest in those companies, and then ended up making some great investments over the last number of years. So some lessons here. Investing really, in my opinion, boils down to three things: visibility, discretion, and access. So visibility is top of funnel, it's a deal flow. Do I even see the deal in the first place? Discretion is, can I tell if it's a good deal? And then access is, will the founder let me write them a check? And different people fail at different levels there. So, one example is Uber. I actually had the chance to invest in Uber at a $4.5 million valuation, and I chose to pass because I didn't think it was a good idea. At the time, they just had, I think, 10 black cars driving around San Francisco, and it was unclear what Uber could ultimately become. So, that was a case where I had visibility, but I kind of applied the wrong discretion. And sometimes you see it, it's a good deal, but the founder won't let you invest. So, I ended up learning how to navigate kind of these three areas, and that allowed me to get into some great deals. And I will say, if any of you are thinking of being investors, at least in Silicon Valley, it's the case that it really is all about how many great people you know. The more great people you know, the more good deals you can get into, because those are there's only a certain number of great founders in every ecosystem, I think. So kind of after Zynga, I took a year off or so, focused on the angel investing, and then I founded Gigster. So Gigster was another search lab. We tried 20 ideas, focused mostly around the future of work. After about a year and a half, we found the idea for Gigster. We ended up raising $32 million from Andreessen and some other great investors, including Mark Benioff from Salesforce and Michael Jordan, the basketball player, which was fun. We grew the company to about 100 employees. We're doing about $40 million in revenue with some fantastic customers: Nike, Google, Exxon, Johnson & Johnson, you name it. So Gigster uses a network of 1,000 freelancers to do work for enterprises, it's kind of a novel model in the enterprise services space. And I've recently hired a professional CEO, so I'm no longer day-to-day at Gigster. Number of lessons from Gigster, actually. So one is that great early-stage investors really can be transformational. So when we raised our A round, we decided to work with Andreessen Horowitz. We'd heard that Andreessen does a really good job of helping early-stage companies, especially in the B2B space. They have this thing called the Executive Briefing Center, where they bring in Fortune 500 executives, and startups that are Andreessen-backed can pitch to those executives. So these are meetings that are like impossible to get. You get to sit with 4 or 5 people that are executives at Exxon, and you get to pitch your technology company to them. So they sat us down. I think they set up about 100 of these meetings for us in the first year or two of Gigster's life. So this really bootstrapped our enterprise sales motion. I think more investors should actually provide more services like this. Andreessen is one of the most full-service investment firms in Silicon Valley. I think they have over 100 operating partners, which are members of the firm that just exist to help out the founders. They have investing partners as well, but that's a smaller team. So I think without Andreessen and some of the advice we got from Andreessen, the company probably wouldn't exist today. So I think VCs, investors aren't always bad for companies. I think they can be very good for companies. Another lesson is when you need something, tell everyone until you get it. So I remember when we were trying to get Michael Jordan as an angel investor. I mean, I could tell you a number of stories about this, but I think I spent 5 or 6 months trying to get an introduction to Michael Jordan's investment team. And this was just like a side project. It was sort of a joke we had going around the office to see if we could get Michael Jordan to invest, and everybody thought it was impossible. And it should have been impossible. It was impossibly hard. So after 5 or 6 months of trying, I just decided over the course of a month to tell everybody I had a meeting with that we were trying to meet Michael Jordan. So I think, if any of you are CEOs and founders, you know how many meetings you have in a given month. It could be 40, 50, 60. So, everybody I met, I said, hey, we're trying to meet Michael Jordan. Do you know anybody? And sure enough, somebody did. Somebody went to high school with Michael Jordan's money manager, and they made an introduction, and then that person got on the phone with us for 45 minutes and pitched them until they agreed to invest. So that was great. If you look at any of the coverage from our Series B round, it's unfortunately very focused on Michael Jordan. It's like, hey, Michael Jordan invested in a tech company, and here's a couple details about it. But it was good because it actually got us, it got our business into a lot of publications we wouldn't otherwise have gotten into. So that was a pretty interesting experience. Just an example of what you can do with enough hustle. One of my biggest regrets from Gigster is I didn't focus enough on hiring. So I think as CEO you should focus, I would say 100% on hiring. And there's an asterisk there that you'll naturally end up having other things you have to do. So you have to raise money, you have to deal with employee issues, you have to set the vision, things like that. You can do that in your spare time. I think the primary goal of a founder and CEO should be to hire, should be to grow the team. I think at Gigster we were set back substantially by not hiring executives early enough in the company. It took us 14 months to hire a VP of sales when we needed one. And that, we were growing a little bit during that process, but I would say that dramatically stunted our growth. So there's a lot of lessons like that I could share in hiring. Another is around culture. So people talk about culture a lot. And there's a lot of kind of non-specific advice about culture. Well, the specific advice I would give you is culture can get you through the tough times. So we spent a lot of money on employee benefits, offsites, activities, events. Every quarterly meeting we did, we'd do a slide deck, and I'd get up and present it in front of the company. And we'd have like 400 slides in these slide decks. Like, we'd have all this programming and games and activities that people get to do. We'd go through everything really rapid fire. They were really fun events that were very high production value that we put a lot of effort into. So when the company had issues, when we didn't hire the VP of sales in time and we had some growth problems, a lot of times you see people just quit. But people stayed with the company because of the culture, because it felt like a family. So that does take investment. It takes a CEO who cares about culture and who does a lot of event programming around culture. Early days, we took team trips to Mexico, Japan, New York. We went to Thailand, and we did a bunch of fun things in Thailand. So that's, if you kind of, if you program great cultural events, you see that people stick together through the tough times more. So you've seen my background. It's in engineering and consumer. So I was nervous about enterprise sales. I thought I wouldn't be able to figure out how to do B2B sales. But the reality is enterprise sales is actually pretty easy if you have a great product. And it's a really pleasant process to sell a great product because you can come into a meeting very confident that somebody wants what you're selling. And it's a lot easier. You don't have to kind of feel like you're making things up or pitching somebody. You're really just telling somebody, hey, I have this great thing. If you want it, let me know. You can buy it. Sign here. So we ended up having a much easier time than we thought we would selling because we had a substantially better product. I think our competitors' average NPS is around 0. It's like 0 or 1 or 2. Maybe it's even like -5. It's not good. So our NPS is actually 65 for Gigster. So we put a lot of work into delivering a great product. Early on, we'd send people like a bottle of wine and a Gigster branded jacket, and they'd have like a dedicated customer success person and all this stuff. We put a ton of work into making a really great product so that we could be even more confident when we were selling it. So I would say to any of you who haven't done a lot of sales yet and are shying away from it, just build a great product and the sales part will largely take care of itself. I remember I was complaining to one of our investors at Andreessen saying, oh, this quarter we might not be able to grow as much. I was blaming growth on something related to our sales team. And he said, well, maybe your product is suffering. You should go back and talk to your customers, see if it's an issue with your product. And sure enough, I think there were some issues with the product that were stunting growth. It's not, I think blaming the sales team was certainly premature. Next one here, I think it's important to be very personable as a CEO. So I can be, I'm a little more of an introverted person. I'm not the kind of person who goes around and like remembers birthdays and pats somebody in the back when they're doing a great job. And I always thought that wasn't really the most important part of being a CEO. But I found that in 360 feedback and reviews that I got that part, the soft skills part of being a CEO really matters a lot to people. I got a ton of feedback on that as a CEO. So yeah, that's definitely something to think about. I think doing 360 reviews can be incredibly helpful to get whatever feedback it is that's useful for you. On the sales side, again, once we completed that search, you know, we ended up with somebody who didn't really serve us as a company. You know, so I think one thing you learn is that around the 30 to 50 employee mark, you really have to hire executives. You need to hire directors, VP level folks. And if you make a bad hire, a bad early exec really can almost kill the company. We had some really big issues with certain execs of the company. So that's something where if you do bring in the wrong person, you want to make a decision very quickly to move them out. And the last thing I'll say here is that startups have a lot of trouble doing more than one thing well. I know that we did. We tried to be both a technology company and a services company at the same time, and we did a very good job in one of those categories and a not so good job in the other. And it kind of confused employees a little bit because they weren't sure, what is this company? What am I supposed to be doing? We only raised $32 million, and that wasn't enough to do both. I think to be that technology company, we needed to raise $100 million. And on the services side, maybe we needed to raise even less. So we ended up having a little bit of an identity crisis, which I think if you recognize as a startup with less than 500 employees, you really can only do one thing. Everybody pulls in around that vision, and it's a lot less confusing what to do when you get to work every day. So the new company, for anyone interested, is called Untitled Labs. This is another search lab concept. It's my third. So we've just raised about $2.8 million from Founders Fund and a couple of other great investors that we worked with in the past at Gigster. And we're hiring full stack engineers and designers, and we're just going to go test about 5 or 10 ideas and see what ends up working out. So that's what I'll be working on for the next couple of years. If anybody wants to chat about that, let me know. There's my contact information. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Roger.